Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019, and, well, you know what? Now that I think about it, well, we're going to have to monitor our levels closely, so we'll get look for a thumbs up. Can you hear me all right? We tried to reset the microphone after yesterday's attempt to get audio off of the laptop because reasons. And I think everything is about back to normal, but I did notice that yesterday's podcast, the second half of it, the microphone levels, well, the podcast was fine, but the live stream, it looked like the microphone levels were a little bit low. No complaints so far, but this is the time. Everybody pick up your phones and whatever else you might use to tweet at me. Mice, I guess. Mouses. And let me know about all your complaints from yesterday. Tell me if everything is okay today. It looks and sounds okay. Maybe it could use a little bit of a boost. Of course, I wouldn't have written down my levels that I really love things at. Sounds good there, Justice? Okay. So if it sounds good for Justice, that's what the rest of you are getting. The end. All right. This morning, let's see. I woke up to being admonished to, oh, look at this. I'm going to take a look at this one. I'm waking up to being admonished to resist the temptation to believe viral video, which is probably actually good advice. I think it's very interesting that it comes now, of course, now that, let's say, Acorn is dead. But this is where we are. In the wake of the Covington Catholic story, which is still working itself out, by the way, because there's still strong defenses being, well, I should say adamant defenses being posted by the Covington Catholic community and those who feel like it's their obligation to stand for them and with them. They are now circulating, apparently, some a popular meme being circulated in Trump Facebook today. I am informed by Stedman's Twitter account, in case you were wondering exactly who was sending me this one. What did they do? They made an artistic rendering, I guess, using Facebook or Instagram filters and whatnot, and have rendered this kid's the kid from Covington Catholic, the main kid, his picture with his smirk and his "Make America Great Again" hat on, over the message "Stand Your Ground." Just in case you were wondering what that Stand Your Ground law was all about, the answer is it is for white kids, sometimes teenagers, to be able to shoot, kill, harass, or otherwise victimize pretty much anyone they want. Maybe even other white people. I really don't know. I guess it depends what it comes down to. Who's wearing what hats at the time. Yeah, I'm a little bit tired of being admonished to now be careful about, although it's true that two wrongs don't make a right, etc. Two wrongs do at least make two strikes, two things that are out there, as opposed to, well, it's not that I don't want there to be, it's not that I disagree that there shouldn't be two wrongs. It's that I don't know that I really like the idea of standing around for just one. You know what I mean? I'm a little tired of that one. So now that, for instance, we're all supposed to be careful about getting the whole story before reacting to any video, I'd like to go back and have the last 10 to 15 years back and restore Acorn, and of course all the time that they lost and all the expertise that they lost and all the employees that they lost and all the opportunities to help people who were depending on them were lost, and goodness, we can't seem to get that back. So I don't know what to tell you about how to interpret viral video from here on. And you should always be careful, of course. But I have this advice for you. You had it right the first time. You had it right the first time, and there were 3 more rounds of video to see, and quite honestly, it didn't change the overall story in the least, as far as I'm concerned. But this morning, The Atlantic, via my, I don't know, what page is that? When I open up my a new tab in my browser. I guess it looks like maybe Pocket has taken over that, and I have sort of recommendations by Pocket that come up when I open a new tab, which is a fine thing for me because I use Pocket a lot. If I were less of an active user, I would be annoyed at their having hijacked my browser homepage, and I would have to look for ways to turn it off, which are available, I'm sure. I just haven't been looking around for it. But this is number one on the list here, recommended by Pocket. Stop trusting viral videos via The Atlantic. Ian Bogost, Bogost, who I don't recall ever running into before, has this technology offering and entry for us. Stop trusting viral videos. A controversial video, it's controversial now, of Catholic students clashing with American Indians appeared to tell a simple truth. And it really does. It does, and it still does. A second video called that story into question, but not very well. But neither shows what truly happened. Well, there was, of course, a third and a fourth and a fifth video. And to be honest, the more videos that come out, the less I think there is in the way of exculpatory evidence for these kids. The larger, more expanded videos that I've seen, the other angles, the ones taken by other people, it does show me a little bit more in it. We learn that our protagonists had a larger context, and we see the annoying harassment they undergo at the hands of a rather unusual cult of street preachers, the Black Hebrew Israelites, who are apparently frequently very aggressive in getting people to try to engage with them by insulting them, and I guess that's their MO. And it seems to have worked with these kids. The thing that I can't get over is there was a long stretch of this video where I am dying for their adult chaperones to get in there and say, all right, kids, this is getting out of control. Enough of this. We're getting on the buses. We're getting out of here. This is a dangerous situation, or at least an embarrassing situation, and we need to be out of here now. And they do not do it. They, in fact, the closest I can tell that they even had adult supervision is in some of the videos, in the sweeps across the crowd, you can see that there are some people with the crowd who don't appear in most cases to be much older at all than the kids there. And so I can't be positive who they are, but they're wearing lanyards around their neck, which is the universal sign for I'm wearing ID, which means I'm, somehow supposed to be in charge here, or I belong on this facility's grounds or whatever. I'm guessing because of their proximity and these lanyards that these are the chaperones for these kids, and in most cases they are cheering right along with them. Anyway, the whole explanation that I guess is being offered that Mr. Phillips, is it, the Native American elder who makes his way in between the groups? I think we went over this yesterday. The idea that he was putting himself in between the school kids and the Black Hebrew Israelites who were fighting with one another, arguing, yelling at one another, makes a certain amount of sense. The idea that his presence there could have been misunderstood makes a certain amount of sense. The fact, though, that the misunderstanding is followed by fake Indian war whooping and tomahawk chopping is not, it's not easy to misinterpret that. It really isn't. And the fact that they didn't understand what Phillips was doing, fine. I might even be able to accept that. I'm willing to entertain that. Gee, can I think of, could it be possible that a bunch of high school kids have no idea what another person their age or otherwise is doing? Sure, easy enough to understand. The reaction to it with tomahawk chops, my goodness, I don't know. Well, it's not the only story like that, by the way. If you wanted to get more of the same, you can click on the sidebar story, I Failed the Covington Catholic Test, by Julie Irwin Zimmerman, who the site notes is a writer based in Cincinnati. And she says, by way of subheadline, next time there's a viral story, I'll wait for more facts to emerge. I have my doubts about that, but I also have my doubts about where they will take you. I have now seen more facts emerge, and I've changed directions on some of these stories before. But quite honestly, I just don't see anything from the expanded video that tells me that there was something different about what they were doing with their war whooping and tomahawk chopping. I don't see it. I say I'd love to know what these people saw, but I think I don't. I think I don't care. I think I saw what was going on. By the way, another video circulating, although much harder to identify the kids involved, and it's not entirely clear that they were Covington Catholic kids. Several other videos circulating. I think one we discussed yesterday, which was did we discuss it yesterday? Had we seen it already? The kids at the basketball game, the Covington Catholic basketball game, in blackface shirtless blackface, head to waist blackface, black chest, black everything, harassing the visiting basketball team who, it just so happens, did have some black players with them, and making a scene as the kid was inbounding the ball from right in front of the student cheering section, which must be, hard as hell in any case. But imagine them whooping and dancing around you in blackface. They explained that one away somehow, saying, well, it's not blackface, it's just the color black, and it's one of our, I don't know whether they said it was one of their school colors. It isn't. We have this weird tradition, and, it's just like Duke basketball, where they paint themselves blue, except black, and with giant lips. Duh. I mean, I don't know how they got out of that one. But the other video that was circulating, I haven't seen circulating very widely, and maybe it's because you can't quite tell who is doing this in the video, but it looks like it was a video taken by perhaps a companion or friend of a young woman walking down the National Mall, presumably after the March for Life and the counter-protest against it, walking past what appeared to be a group of these similar kids, if not the same kids, similarly dressed, the hoodies, the right colors, that it could be Covington Catholic kids, and the Make America Great Again hats, etc. And they're like, I don't know what, catcalling and whooping for whatever reason at this woman walking by, although it's not clear that she's carrying any protest signs or is dressed as a counter-protester might be expected to be dressed or whatever. But she walks by and her friend is videoing, and they are whooping it up and shouting at them, and this woman just is like, I'm just so tired of this. And it's not clear, again, exactly who the kids are, but it sure looks for all the world like on their way to the Lincoln Memorial, they stop and take a rest on the benches and catcall at the young women who walk by, which is just, I guess it's par for the course at this point, but they are angels, as you know, and we have to give them a chance to something, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm all full here on it's time to forgive the kids, or take another look at the viral video, or look at it this way or look at it that way. I'm full up here, so I think you're wasting your time at this point. I'm not sure what drove the Atlantic to find sympathy with these kids over this, but I'm done with it, so moving on. It is Tuesday, and so we are without Greg Dworkin, and of all days, on Tuesday, of course, we wake up this morning to the news that there are emerging traditional media reports that Trump's base, what's left of it, is actually beginning to wonder whether this whole government shutdown thing isn't actually something of a mess, for which they ought to blame him. And I think that they actually should. And I'm surprised to see that this is being reported, though we cannot claim to be surprised that this is the case. Greg has been telling this for us forever, And we've been disbelieving him. I don't know. Maybe you've been believing him. I've been believing him. I just have been waiting for more concrete manifestation. And this isn't it either, but this is a good sign and a hopeful sign. Oh, I said that we were done with the Covington Catholic thing. I just want to warn you that we may have to return to it at some point later on to catch up with some of the other things that I think help give context to the context-giving contest that's going on now. But as for Trump's voters blaming him for the government shutdown, I guess I have two Washington Post pieces that deserve attention today. We'll go to that one first. And then there was, I guess, another recent, the White House is in chaos and out of control, and you'll never believe it. And we're going to talk to some insiders anonymously about how absent-minded and stupid the president is stories. And I don't tire of those very frequently. So perhaps we can use one of those to entertain us later on. But this one first. Trump voters now blame him for the government shutdown, which is smart. I'm glad they're paying attention. I mean, I don't know what took them so long because, of course, prior to the shutdown, Donald Trump went on television, pointedly went on television. He insisted that the television cameras be there. The Democrats with whom he was meeting, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, thought it would be wiser if the cameras were not there, but you know how Donald Trump is about cameras. And then he got conked on by Nancy Pelosi, and everyone saw that. And then, of course, even in his dealing with Chuck Schumer, he sat there and said, I'm to blame for the shutdown. I want to do it. I can't wait to do it. It's my idea. Please, please, please. I'll shut down the government. I won't blame you for it. I'll take the blame for it immediately. We all knew what that meant, right? Donald Trump said he wasn't going to take the blame for it. We know that means Donald Trump is not going to take the blame for it. He said he wasn't going to blame Democrats for it. That means he is going to blame Democrats for it. That was simple enough. We were right, once again, in our interpretation of what he meant. And, well, here we are. Anyway, now Trump voters are beginning to blame him for the shutdown. Fancy that. Matt Visor, the writer on this piece, came out yesterday at 11. This is how we missed it. And bylined in Michigan. Now, I never did... I don't remember how we decided this is pronounced. The county in Michigan. Those of you who are nearby can tell us. M-A-C-O-M-B. Is it Macomb or Macomb? How do they like to pronounce that? County in Michigan. It's famous. We've been over it 100 times. They keep going back to this. They have too many diners. We can't not be there, right? 2 years ago, Jeff Dowdert, D-A-U-D-E-R-T, I'm guessing, was fed up with politics. Can you believe it? Oh, by the way, speaking of fed up with politics, did any of you happen to, was yesterday the first day that they aired this Brexit docudrama sort of thing on HBO yesterday? I watched a bit of that. So brings up some bad memories from last night. It was infuriating to watch, of course. Anyway, poor Jeff, he's fed up with politics. He wanted to shake up the status quo. Can you dig it, man? He really wanted to. Okay, so there you have it. He's not a hippie, though. He's an American traditionalist who wants to shake up the status quo because something, man. Anyway, frankly, he says, he liked the idea of a disruptive president. Isn't that amazing? But the 49-year-old retired Navy reservist has had some second thoughts. Now, I thought in the Navy they would have taught you to have those thoughts first and plan for them. But, whatever. 49 years old and retired. God bless you, sir. Good for you. Everybody else wants handouts. You just wanted to retire at 49. Hey, I'll get out of your way. What the expletive were we thinking, he asked the other night inside a Walmart here. In an area of blue-collar suburban Detroit that helped deliver the presidency to Trump. Can you believe it? Has anybody... yet texted me the proper pronunciation for the county? No. All right. Well, we'll make one up if we have to hit that again. While Trump's relationship with much of his base remains strong, 2 years after his inauguration, his ties are fraying with voters like Dowdert and these are the kind who voted in droves for Trump in key pockets throughout the industrial Midwest, flipping previously Democratic states to him in 2016. The shutdown fight, as it has played out over the last month, is further eroding the president's support among voters who like the idea of beefing up border security, but not enough to close the government. And we'll have to catch up on some of the latest, so far, unforeseen consequences. I mean, the people who work in these departments foresaw these consequences, but the rest of us didn't. The things that are piling up with this shutdown are unbelievable. But first, we continue here. Many here, even those who still support Trump, they went to some diners and bars, say they hold him most responsible. They recite his comment, from the Oval Office, that he would be, quote, proud to shut down the government. When he said it, they listened. Isn't that amazing? And by the way, that wasn't the first time. Trump, I challenge the traditional media who keep track of such things, not because I think they can't do it, but because they can, to count how many times the president, as president and during the campaign, threatened to shut down the government in order to get one or another of the things he wanted. But he kept saying that government shutdown would be a great idea, that we needed a government shutdown. He's been pushing for this since before he even had a reason. And that's worrisome for, perhaps, if we can remember it, reasons we'll get to later on in the show about, well, the curious effect, let's say, of finding ourselves now opening for business, the government, the United States government, now open for business to Russian oligarch mobsters. Come on in, pick up your money, no more freezing your assets, free to do business, take whatever you want. But the government is closed with respect to, now I would tell you, poor people who are food insecure and unable to redeem food stamp benefits to feed their families. You would care about that. The MAGA hat folks would not. Presumably the MAGA hat folks care a little bit, slightly more, about not paying, law enforcement agents, TSA agents, though I'm sure that they would shake their fist and say, good, one time I was late getting to Cinnabon because of these guys, and I didn't get my Cinnabon before I went on a flight to Branson. These sorts of problems. Of course, they might be even more upset about the Coast Guard not getting paid, but a lot of these people may have never seen a coast, for one thing, and think the Coast Guard is not a real thing, or not a real armed service. And quite honestly, I think we did them a tremendous disservice by moving them to Homeland Security, even though I understood it made a certain amount of sense to do that. They are, in fact, chiefly responsible for securing the coastline of the homeland, but if they're an armed force, then they belong with the rest of the armed forces. Anyway, apparently this doesn't disturb a whole lot of them, but it is interesting that U.S. government employees who need to get paid can't feed their families, but Russian mobsters open for business. And this is not treason because technical reasons. So just stand by, America. We'll keep paying the Russians and not you because of how much I love America and how America needs to be first. Okay. Anyway, back to this story about how he was going to be proud to shut down government, and they actually paid attention to that. It's silly. It's destructive, our friend Jeff had said, adding that he knows all about 2020. All he knows about 2020 is he won't be supporting Trump. I was certainly for the anti-status quo. Maybe I'll be more status quo next time, which is a bad idea because, Jeff, you see, at the moment, the status quo is what was once anti-status quo. I think you mean, status quo anti? Is that what you meant? Or, I don't know. Maybe he's smarter than we give him credit for, but I think that it seems like he doesn't know exactly what status quo may mean, but maybe I misunderstand it, or maybe I misunderstand him. Anyway, here in whatever that county is, Michigan, far from the nation's capital and in an area not dominated by federal workers, the government shutdown is resonating in an unusual way. People are noticing that the government does things. A trampoline park is giving government employees and their families an hour of free jumping. I don't know if that's, I guess it's nice, but okay. A local credit union is offering low-interest loans for furloughed employees who need to replace lost salaries. Some local governments in the area are beginning to allow federal workers to defer payments on property taxes, utility bills, and parking tickets. Food drives are being discussed to help Transportation Security Administration workers at Detroit's airport. And, importantly, a yoga studio is offering free classes for federal employees. It's important. You got to be able to de-stress. But, I don't know whether this plays so well in the county necessarily. Oh, really? Free jumping time and yoga classes, eh? Well, suddenly, salt of the earth are interested in trampoline jumping and yoga. Good. I'm glad. Here, have some for free. As a community, it affects us because other people are being affected. Yes, that's right. Says Jasmine Cromwell, who runs, I thought we had made a great discovery here. She runs Jasmine's Bowling Alley? No, she runs Bodhi Seed Yogurt and Wellness Studio. I had a feeling we might have her on our side, but it's always good to shore up things with Jasmine, whether we know them or not. Maybe I'm getting too yoga-like, maybe, but we are all connected. It affects everyone. It affects us as a nation. She's right, of course, and, it's just that 3 weeks ago that was la-di-da, who cares, you stupid hippie, and now we're all, into it. I'm glad some people might be coming around to the conclusion that shutting down the entire United States government is a bad idea. Better late than never, as Greg would admonish me to remember, I am sure. But I would admonish him to remember that we're about to take our first break, and that pretty soon the music will start, and then we'll be gone for 2 minutes, and so that'll teach you to try and remind me to be a fair-minded person. Anyway, we'll fit in one more paragraph here. Recent polling indicates that the government shutdown has caused skittishness among parts of Trump's base. I thought they were not skittish people, but these guys are, which has been one of the most enduring strengths of his presidency. Not the skittishness, but their support. NPR PBS NewsHour Marist survey. Oh, I'm sorry, we're out of time now because it took that long to read the name of the survey. Darn it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see, shall we jump right back to where we were reading about what's happening out in Michigan? Yeah, I think so. We were in the middle, when we had to take our break, of reading the name of the poll that was conducted that tells us the latest about where Trump's base is. It is, remember, an NPR, PBS NewsHour, Marist.com, Wood, Blood, Moon, Wolf, Super Duper poll. That's, I don't know, these merged polls. I appreciate them wanting to conserve resources, but really. Anyway, this poll, conducted from January 10th to January 13th, found that Trump's net approval rating had dropped. Remember that? 7 points since December. And similar results in other polls. In case you were wondering, you remember Greg telling you about that. One of the biggest declines came among suburban men. We haven't talked a lot about suburban men lately, whose approval rating of Trump fell a net 18 percentage points. Their wives are beating them up over this, I hope. While support from evangelicals, remember them, and Republicans dipped by smaller margins. Evangelicals being the problem people here. I don't understand why he's shutting down the government. It's terrible for us, but it must be God's will. Suburban men in general, I guess, less inclined to simply dismiss things that way. Among men without a college degree, the downward change was 7 points. In other words, the same as everything else. Okay, as Jeremiah Wilburn, a 45-year-old operating engineer, browsed the aisles at Walmart for a new pair of coveralls, he reflected on some of those shifts. And I don't know what kind does Walmart have a wide selection of coveralls, or was he browsing where are the coveralls? Or was he I want them in fuchsia. Where are they? I think the choices are limited, but okay. It's very workmanlike of him to be looking for coveralls, and now you've set the scene. Like many voters here, after siding with Barack Obama in 2 elections, he decided to gamble with Trump in 2016. And it's a great word choice because you know what happens with people who try to gamble with Trump. And you know what happens when Trump tries to run gambling as well. Anyway, and for most of the past 2 years, Jeremiah was pleased. The economy was humming. Jobs were flowing. What? And wages seemed stable. Of course, that's been the problem. Wages have seemed stable for about 40 years, and they have been in real dollar terms. Anyway, all of this until now. Something else has happened now. I was doing fine with him until this government shutdown, he said. This is rather amazing, really. It's ridiculous. You're not getting the wall built for $5 billion. True. And Mexico is not paying for it. We all know that, too. Ah, good. Meanwhile, it's starting to turn people like me away. He worries that about the shutdown's effect on the economy. He's concerned about the impact on his brother, who works for the TSA in Florida. Guess what the impact is? You're concerned about the impact? The impact is your brother's out of work. To him, the shutdown standoff has also poked holes in Trump's ability to say he cares for the working class, given that 800,000 federal employees and an additional number of contractors are going without paychecks. Yes, but he never really had the ability to say he cares for the working class. Look at him. Look at his house. Why were you ever kidding yourself about that? He's got a golden toilet. And I'm not even kidding. You can't expect people to come to work without getting paid, really? Wilburn said, if I were one of them, I certainly wouldn't come to work. And by the way, I need a message for our folks who are now a month plus without pay. I don't want to tell you what to do. It's up to you, etc. But it's not a general strike if you're furloughed. They're the ones that said don't come to work. Now, this wouldn't apply necessarily to the people who have been deemed essential and are being forced to come to work and not get paid. That's even worse. The furloughed people, I guess, can find some limited amount of alternative employment, but certainly anything that would pay anything close to what they were getting is probably creating a conflict with them, as they're still considered federal employees. But, between the TSA agents and others who are, calling in sick, not so much because they're doing a mass sick out, but because they're trying to find work as Uber drivers or something else to make ends meet during the furlough. If the government says don't come, or we're not paying you, or breaks their contract with you that way, I don't know that not coming to work is a strike. I mean, they'll argue that it is. I'm going to say it's probably not. And, between that and the LA teachers strike, and I'm not even sure how that came out. I haven't checked back in on that one. And a lot of people are kind of calling for this idea of maybe we all ought to stop things in solidarity, if you will, with what's going on with the federal employees. It might be interesting to see, but you know how we are about strikes in this country these days. Anyway, but sensible salt of the earth folk like Jeremiah know you can't expect people to come to work without getting paid. And yet we do. Macomb County, this county in Michigan, is in the suburbs of north of Detroit. I knew they told us it was in the suburbs. Maybe they skipped the part that it was north. Thank you for bringing that back up. Has been a perennial political battleground and a place where the broad sweeps of American politics can be seen. Come and see it. It was the most Democratic suburb in the country when John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960, and then it helped usher in the phrase Reagan Democrats when Ronald Reagan won the White House 2 decades later. Obama won the county twice, and then Trump defeated Hillary Clinton here by 12 points, Cambridge Analytica said. Oops, sorry, I sneaked that part in. The county is filled with the kind of white working class voters whose flip to Trump has been the most heralded part of his coalition. Trump came here during his campaign, and again, in the final days before the 2016 election. That's also in his campaign. Don't know why they phrase it that way. He returned last year for a rally meant to pointedly spurn the White House Correspondents Association dinner that same night. Huge controversy in the county, I'm sure. It's an area he has continued to nurture, except for taking away all their livelihoods. But in the midterm elections, some of those voters started to peel away. Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan carried the county by 2 points, and Governor Gretchen Whitmer by 4. Whitmer ran a campaign that barely mentioned Trump and instead promoted basic bipartisan governance with the slogan, "Fix the damn roads." Yes, but shaking it up like everyone likes, right? So say damn and hell a lot. Sure. I guess that's the answer. The 2020 Democratic presidential primary contest is expected to include a heavy dose of debate over how to balance attempts to win back white working class voters. Oh, yes. Those who live here, as well as in states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, which Trump also won, with the energy around ascendant women and minorities. Those attempts will also draw into question whether Democrats can find a way to articulate an immigration plan in areas like this, where the issue resonates. Trump's insistence on building a border wall has hardened Democrats, whose most prominent policy now is to stop the wall. They rarely tout their own views on border security, but that issue remains important to many voters in industrial states. In focus groups after Clinton's loss, Democrats discovered that immigration played a bigger role here than they had thought it would. And again, I recommend you take a look at the Brexit docudrama on HBO if you get a chance. People do want immigration managed, said Stan Greenberg, a Democratic pollster who has been studying Macomb County voters since the 1980s and probably knows how to pronounce it. Trump makes it hard because he's so outrageous. He's wacky. You don't want to give him an inch. But immigration is still an important issue, and Democrats will have to speak to it. Sure, why not? We can absolutely do it. But why build a wall to do it? That doesn't work, and it's extraordinarily expensive, and even the guy who ran on building one doesn't want to build one. Trump faces a countering demand of his own, placating former supporters who saw the border wall as a stand-in for more security and those who want his promise delivered. Ken Janicki, I don't know how he would say, Janicki, Ken Janicki, a 66-year-old retired technology worker who voted for Trump, sipped his coffee the other day and put it in blunt terms. Oh boy, hey, here we go. I am all for border security, a full wall around this country. Oh, all the way. North and south. He said, you come in legally, I'll welcome you to be my neighbor. And you don't know what that means, but okay. You come in illegally and I'll introduce you to my friend Smith and my other friend Wesson. Haw, haw, haw. He's so blunt. He's so plain-spoken. Why, he's the salt of the earth. Just the sort of Christian neighbor you know. All right, whatever. Okay, meanwhile, of course, the people who are coming here seeking asylum are coming here legally. You just don't understand what that means, nuance, etc. But neither Smith nor Wesson speak nuance. What am I going to do? Even with the shutdown, most in this land of strip malls and 6-lane boulevards, automotive plants and single-family homes seem to feel better about the economy. We're booming right now. So what's the problem? How can I not like a guy that gives me more money and lowers my taxes? Says Jeff Cordell, a 57-year-old construction worker. I haven't heard the word layoff since he's been in, and that's saying something around here. He must have missed the auto plants that actually closed on his watch. But okay. There's also a nagging concern that a downturn could be coming, in part because of forces Trump has unleashed. Some overtime shifts have gone away. Several large buildings that once housed a Kmart or a bowling alley, not a yoga studio, but a bowling alley, or a restaurant are now empty. Times have been good, but things are slowing down a bit, said Matt DeVoist, a 62-year-old electrician who had just polished off a large breakfast at Coney Island, a staple of the Michigan diner scene. Hey, diner, ding, we hit that mark. If they don't find common ground with China, who knows Really. We're stable but nervous. It's the fear of the unknown. Mike Keyes, who in 2016 won a seat as a Democrat on the Board of Trustees in the county's Clinton Township, said the anxiety in the area, everyone hates anxiety, especially economic anxiety, can make Trump's economic optimism seem slightly off-key. It's interesting that economic optimism is apparently exactly how to appeal to the economically anxious. You might think, it's not totally off base. Don't worry, things are going to get better. Oh, that's a message I appreciate. As opposed to, what are you talking about? You have no plan. You keep just saying, I'm going to do a beautiful, beautiful thing for the economy. Yeah, the economy is getting better. There's more jobs, but pay raises, we're not seeing that, he said. This is Mike Keyes, the Democrat. If you haven't gotten a substantial raise in the last 5 or 10 years, you see Trump talking about the greatest economy, there's a disconnect. At a Kroger in St. Clair Shores, across the lake, from Canada, residents were deeply divided. In the cereal aisle, Henry Black, a 69-year-old who spent his career at General Motors, voted for Trump, likes what the president has done, and had a dire warning for him, if he shifts course on the border wall. Oh my. Trump needs to stand firm on this, he said. If he gives in to the Democrats on this, he's finished. With who? With people like you think? We'll see. Near the pharmacy, Erica McQueen, a 38-year-old from St. Clair Shores, voted for Trump and also has liked a lot of what he's done. Which is what? I'm not sure. But it gets overshadowed by the stunts he pulls, she said. The shutdown, she said, is one of them. The wall is getting out of hand, she said. It's too much. It's ridiculous. I'm sick of seeing it. I'm sick of hearing about it. Like other one-time Trump supporters, she's now openly wondering if she can back him again. I'm a deep thinker. Something miraculous has to happen, she said, for me to vote for him again. And luckily she's an evangelical, and so that miracle will come. And the miracle is God spoke to me and said nothing should happen and we should make no progress. Yeah, can't wait. We'll see. We'll see. But I have to hold out some hope. This is more than people have been saying about putting more distance between them and Trump than they've been willing to do in the last couple weeks. Anyway, let's see. A few other things to note. I will return just briefly to the Covington Catholic thing to catch you up with one or two other articles on this. This one from the neighborhood, the Louisville Courier-Journal, and Grace Schneider, the writer there, fills us in with this one. In case you were wondering about this, I think we commented on it briefly yesterday when we read that the kid from the video, the main kid, and his name is out there now, and I guess for ease of reference, we'll tell you the kid's name is Nick Sandman, I guess, unless they say Sandman, but two N's at the end. Anyway, Nick put out what was supposed to be his statement about what actually happened, and it was, relatively eloquent in the way it was phrased. Oh, I see I have the AMP version of this story open, so let's see if I can get the original story just so we can get our formatting right. And anyway, he put out a statement, and like I said, it was eloquently enough done that people wondered, oh, what are the chances that this kid actually wrote this himself? And the answer right then and there was near zero. A lot of people feel put off or in some way hoodwinked by the idea that some PR professionals might have helped this kid put together his statement. I'm not surprised by it at all. I'm a little surprised, I guess, by the idea of, oh, my teenager got in trouble, so we hired a PR company. But this has become a national issue, and it was probably wise of them to go ahead and do that. And, I guess you try to help yourself out in any way you can in a situation like this. Yes, they hired a PR company, and it's all covered here in the Courier-Journal by Grace Schneider. We'll read a couple of paragraphs just to set the tone for you and let you know who the PR company is, in case you're interested in that. In the hours after, video clips showed Covington Catholic student Nick Sandmann standing face-to-face with a Native American man during a rally in Washington, D.C. This is as anodyne as you could possibly put it. The incident went viral and drew a huge backlash against the teen and the Northern Kentucky school. But by Sunday evening, coverage of what happened provided a more detailed account of events. Did it really? Along with a statement from Sandmann that seemed to tamp down the explosion of anger against the teen, thanks in part to extended video from the rally. Not really. I didn't think so. And the involvement of Louisville public relations firm RunSwitch PR. And it's presented as one word with a capital R and S. RunSwitch PR. On Sunday night, Sandmann released a 3-page statement in which Nick defended his actions and offered his version of events, describing himself as a Christian and a practicing Catholic. He wrote that the Native American man Nathan Phillips had approached him, not the other way around. Phillips supported that in separate interviews later in the weekend. But of course, he approached me, not the other way around. Yeah, and then what did you do? I'm telling you he approached me. I see. But then what happened? He approached me. That is all. Asked about its role, RunSwitch released a statement stating that the firm, quote, has been retained by the Sandmann family to offer professional counsel with what has become a national media story. We are working with the family to ensure an accurate recounting of events which occurred this past weekend. Of course, if they were interested in ensuring an accurate recounting of events, then you would not hire them. You are interested in portraying your version of events in the hopes that people will mistake your version or the consideration of your version for a fair and balanced or accurate recounting. But okay, I know it's your job not to say that. I get it. RunSwitch partners Steve Bryant and Gary Gerdeman said that the Sandmann family asked people they knew over the weekend about getting help with handling the media. They reached out to our firm and we responded, said Bryant, adding that the business specializes in crisis management all over the country. I'm just sort of wondering whether they'll get around to telling us which one of the partners or senior associates who works at the firm also has a kid at Covington Catholic, but I guess they never get to that. It might not even be the case. Sure, it's not. Scott Jennings, a conservative political commentator and a columnist for the Courier-Journal, is the third partner in RunSwitch. Don't know if anybody recognizes his name. The original short video showed Sandmann wearing a bright red Make America Great Again hat facing Phillips as the man pounded an indigenous drum. An indigenous drum. Well, it's good to know the drum came from here. He's indigenous too, and it was his drum. And he chanted. A larger group of students jumped and clapped to the beat. That's a generous way of putting it. While Sandmann appeared to smirk at the man, he and Phillips were nearly touching in the video. They nearly touched. The impression was that the teen was being disrespectful and fellow students were glad to egg on a confrontation, which is what happened. Covington Catholic High and the Diocese of Covington condemned the behavior of the students, because they know that's what happened, with the diocese vowing to open an investigation. But now they can close it because they have a different story. Is it worth going on? I don't think so, except if you didn't get a chance to read the statement from Nick Sandmann and you wanted a short-ish version of it, there's a quote of it here. Sandmann and his family statement said in part that the teen wasn't trying to inflame tensions. I believe that by remaining motionless and calm, I was helping to diffuse the situation. He's not a smart kid. I realized everyone had cameras and that perhaps a group of adults was trying to provoke a group of teenagers into a larger conflict. This is pure cheese here. I said a silent prayer that the situation would not get out of hand. He said in a statement, I did smile at one point because I wanted him to know that I was not going to become angry, intimidated, or be provoked into a larger confrontation. Interesting. He was not going to become angry, and nor was he going to become intimidated. The smile was obviously supposed to say that. And, I don't know. Other statements released by the family earlier said that he was smiling because he was enjoying the moment and he was getting into the spirit of the man's prayer offering, all of which is belied by, being able to view the video and see what was going on, and no mention of tomahawk chops and war whoops in this story anyway. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that yes, he did in fact have a professional PR firm. And I guess I will add this piece, which I thought was important for those of you perhaps questioning yourself in all of this. From the concourse, Laura Wagner says it all in the headline, "Don't doubt what you saw with your own eyes." I assure you, I'm with her on this one. You had it right the first time. There's nuance to it, yes, but you had it largely right. 2 days ago, video was posted online that pretty much everyone who saw immediately recognized for what it was. Footage of white teens taunting and harassing a Native American elder named Nathan Phillips on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. What was happening was clear and unmistakable. Not just resonant, but immediately recognizable as iconic. If you wanted to compress the history of relations between the powerful and the powerless in America, or the dynamics of the current moment, into a single image, you couldn't do much better than to present a white teen in a MAGA hat, surrounded by a screaming horde of his peers, smirking into the face of an old Native American man. That's basically all you need to know. Now, there's much more, and she covers an awful lot more, but I don't even know. I'm not even certain how much further to go with it, although perhaps we might as well just read it going into the break. It's not quite as long as it seemed by scrolling down here. Probably, she continues, because what had happened was so undeniable, it was immediately denied. It's an important line. Right-wing trolls not only immediately proposed that the visibly aggressive teens who were draped in the symbols of white nationalism and misogyny were in fact the aggressed upon, but began a campaign of brutal online harassment against anyone, especially journalists and especially female journalists, who accurately described what they had seen or reacted to it on the terms it deserved. In all, it was an enactment of the culture war tactics pioneered by Gamergate and used by Donald Trump to ascend to the pinnacle of global power. While random MAGA chuds and pepes doxed and threatened people online in an attempt to silence them and intimidate others, respectable types urged caution, proposing that if you were thoughtful enough, you would perhaps realize that you hadn't, in fact, seen what you had just seen, or that if you had, maybe it wasn't all that bad. Straight news reporters, like the Wall Street Journal's Byron Tao, turned the subtext into text, asking whomst among us hadn't participated in a racially charged frenzy of barely restrained violence that they wish hadn't become an instant iconic representation of what America had been historically and what it is now. That was, of course, her words and not his. He was basically going on and saying, look, everyone's done stupid things before. She embeds his tweet in the story. Yesterday, Reason's Robbie Soave, I guess, S-O-A-V-E, right? Soave, a professional contrarian, published a story built around a video, which is linked in the post, showing what was plainly visible in the initial footage. Belligerent teens chanting and crowding around an old man until he was surrounded, but proposing that it added important context that strongly contradicts the media's narrative. The video did add context, showing that Phillips and other demonstrators present for the Indigenous Peoples March were interposing themselves between teens draped in racist, misogynist paraphernalia and members of the Black Israelite cult, but did not, despite Suave's assertions, contradict the narratives set forth by either Phillips or the media, by which one can only assume he meant journalists straightforwardly describing what was there to be seen. Last night, the smirking teen, Nick Sandman, was identified in a statement issued in his name by the publicity firm his parents hired for him, in which he suggested that he was in fact the victim of the situation. The reaction to Soave's story and the public relations firm's statements was as depressing as it was predictable. Respectable news organizations and journalists to whom being seen as balanced, level-headed, and more attuned to context and contingency than the reactive social media mob is more important than reporting the most accurate version of the truth as best they can tell it, backed off, following reason's lead and doing the work of the gibbering masturbators is what they tell us, who had risen up in defense of the MAGA teens. They were all too happy to say that the sky was not blue if it meant burnishing their credentials as serious and objective, and fell over each other to back away from what was right in front of their eyes. Or rather, from what was right in front of their eyes. Here, the New York Times headline is embedded. Fuller picture emerges of viral video of Native American man and Catholic students. CNN's headline, a new video shows a different side of the encounter between a Native American elder and teens in MAGA hats. The Atlantic, of course, gave us the I failed the Covington Catholic test one. Later on, the other one we referred to today. Huffington Post, new video complicates uproar over incident between student and Native American man. Washington Examiner, who no one should depend on for anything, rush to judgment. New details emerge on Native American elders' standoff with MAGA hat-wearing teens. Washington Times, also unreliable. New video shows Native American man confronting Catholic teens with MAGA hats at March for Life. As a Native American man is doing the confronting. Bustle, even. The full video of the MAGA hat teens and protesters, Nathan Phillips, shows different angles, and I suppose you can't argue too much with the fact that it shows different angles. Strangely, or perhaps not, these stories either gloss over or fail to mention completely the fact that the white MAGA-clad students from a pricey Kentucky private school called Covington Catholic were doing the tomahawk chop motion and mocking the way Phillips was singing. Neither do they detail the fact that Phillips only walked near the writhing mass of sneering young white men as a way to try and calm them. Relitigating what is as plain to see on the initial videos as it is on the one suave surfaced, or as it is on any of the others, is as exasperating as it is depressing an exercise, but perhaps worth noting that the clearest and most revelatory video, one that has not, to my knowledge, caused any consternation. We'll have to take our break. I'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A little bit, had to dash upstairs and get everybody ready for our delayed opening once again here in the school zone. So just wanted to take that 1 minute break to run upstairs and wake the sleeping teens. Okay, where do we leave off? Yes, we got cut off, I think, here. Strangely, or perhaps not, we were saying, these stories either gloss over or fail to mention the tomahawk chop, right, and the mocking of Phillips's singing. Neither do they detail that Phillips only walked near the kids, of course, to try to calm them. Here's where we were, relitigating what is as plain to see on the initial videos as it is on the one suave surfaced, or as it is on any others, as exasperating as it is depressing an exercise, but perhaps worth noting that the clearest and most revelatory video, one that has not, to my knowledge, caused any reconsideration in respectable outlets of what actually happened here, comes from Indian Country Today, a vital news outlet covering Native issues. Here's an unedited video of the minutes leading up to the video of Sandman smirking in Phillips' face. And of course, for whatever reason, are we in perhaps the AMP version here? Because, yep, of course we are. The video is not visible, but I assume that when we provide you with the link for you to read the story, you will be able to see it. And, I don't know how long that video is, and it certainly would probably be too long for us to play through here, and would show you more of the same, but I guess somewhat different angle. Let's see if she describes it here. One lesson of the past 2 days, maybe not, is that you will see what you want to see here if you are determined to do so. That does not mean that there is anything to be seen, but what is there? I see a frothing mass of MAGA youth who, since we're taking in all angles here, go to school where students fairly recently wore blackface to a basketball game, frenzied and yelling and out of control. I see 4 black men who seem to belong to the Black Israelites, a threat to women in their orbit, but not to random white people they're heckling, yelling insults at the students. Then I see Phillips, as he has stated from the beginning that he did walk up to the teens in what seems to be an attempt to defuse the situation. I see them laughing and dancing, red MAGA hats bobbing up and down in glee. I see them yell in Phillips's face, and I see that he doesn't falter. I see the smugness of a group secure in its relative power over someone more vulnerable than they are. Nothing about the video showing the offensive language of Black Israelites changes how upsetting it was to see the Covington students, and Sandman in particular, stare at Phillips with such contempt. I don't see how you could watch this and think otherwise unless you're willing to gaslight yourself and others in the service of granting undeserved sympathy to the privileged. Many were more than happy to do just that, and further examples are, of course, included. Let's see. I got to scroll all the way down here because the AMP version of things gets in the way and just hands me a lot of blank space. I can only hope these journalists and public figures, so eager to perform reasonableness over something they didn't even get wrong, I like that, perform reasonableness, interesting, will publicly self-flagellate just as vigorously when they actually F up in the future. And the answer is, of course, no, they won't, just as they didn't in the past with Acorn. As for why so many people are willing to not trust their own eyes, why they'll readily accept the MAGA teens, let's say, crappy and unconvincing publicist-created explanation that he didn't do anything wrong, why news organizations rolled back reporting based on little new evidence, and why so many people lashed themselves to the whipping post in the square and begged for forgiveness, the answer is, I think, simple. These people are willing to give the screaming mob of white teens the benefit of the doubt because it distinguishes them from the emotion-driven hordes. It's something like virtue signaling, but instead of attempting to signal that they hold any type of moral or ethical principles, these people are attempting to show that they are willing to be chastened and are so thoughtful, And I like it the other way, actually, and are so thoughtful. I can admit when I'm wrong, they say, so you can always trust me. And there's a little bit of that play going on, too. It's never good for the likes of Robbie Suave or Barry Weiss or the Cool Priest or the Atlantic or CNN to be too vociferously on the same side as people on the left angrily yelling about how a bad thing is bad, not only because it's not the done thing, but because their brands rely on finding middle ground and pushing back against anyone who seems to care too much about something they don't. Somehow, of course, this always seems to land them on the side of the powerful and the privileged. They need to be seen as reasonable and responsible and responsive, different from the frenzied masses. If that meant siding with some S-head MAGA teens and saying that 2 + 2 = 5 in the face of every bit of evidence there is to be had, and so be it. So, all right. Thanks, Laura, for that piece. I thought that was pretty interesting and well put for the most part. Reminded me of about 5 different trajectories we could take off of this, but I quickly forgot all of them. So, we'll see where we go with this one next. I think, though, here we'll probably call a halt to the Covington Catholic folks or at this point, but let's see. Okay, and I got a panicked message here from Meredith who says, "Is it me? I can't hear you." And then afterwards, it was me. Okay, so I'm glad things are back online for you. And of course, one more point I guess I'll throw in there that I think has been well made elsewhere, and I believe we have in fact not yet actually mentioned today anyway about this, but Rebecca reminds me, don't forget that these little kids, let's say, from Covington were in D.C. to support forced birthers in their attempt to control women and restrict their reproductive choices. Being racist a-holes was just a bonus, and that is true, and it makes the cat calling, if it was them, all the more disgusting, I think, although it was plenty disgusting all by itself when I saw it earlier. Let's see. Other things that we need to turn to. Gosh, there's a lot. I kind of want to read the, oh my God, the Trump White House is a disaster story, but I don't really feel like you need to hear that one again, but it is news and people are talking about it. Let me turn instead to something that I thought would have made a great follow-up yesterday, but now you're all bored with. But Mark Sumner wrote and published, but only after we finished up here yesterday, Trump's digital campaign and Russia's Internet Research Agency, a fully integrated operation. Goes along with our piece that we read yesterday, which I still am slightly confused about, because as I mentioned, the basis of the segment was this piece from the Moscow Times, and the Moscow Times does appear, for all intents and purposes, to be a Russian publication and not one that's working underground necessarily in opposition to the government or anything like that. It's just is it any more trustworthy? I don't know whether it's more or less trustworthy than RT, but so do we go with it because it was giving us the narrative we were interested in? Is that a reason enough? Or is it just it could be true? Was it trolling in a weird way, like we speculated yesterday, that they were just plain going to tell us what was actually going on in the hopes that we would somehow be intimidated or rendered hopeless in the face of their admission that they were doing this? I'm not really certain why they would have reported this, but they're reporting it's more than just that the narrative fits. I guess it is another way of saying the narrative fits by saying it comports with so much of the rest of the reporting that's gone on. I guess that's exactly the definition of it, fitting the narrative, isn't it? So I'm a little worried about that, but I wanted to turn to Mark Sumner's summation of much of the same thoughts. I mean, it's true that they said it, and it's true that I shouldn't trust what they have to say, but on the other hand, I think it really does seem to, it certainly matches where I am. I do believe that a lot of this coordination was obvious and went on, and they've as much as admitted to it. What they're not admitting to is, I guess, how much time they spent trying to cover their tracks. Well, anyway, here's Mark's piece, Trump's digital campaign and Russia's Internet Research Agency, a fully integrated operation. It begins with a flow chart of sort, outlining the digital conspiracy, as it's styled here. And I don't know, is it worth trying to describe to you what's going on? It relates here, on the one side, the Russians, and on the other side, the American operation, the public face of which being campaign websites, online fundraising, social media here in the U.S., and over on the Russian side, pop-up news sites, or quote, news sites, social media bots, YouTube videos, false front organizations, false accounts, purchased advertising, also our American side purchased advertising. The players here in the internet data sphere, the Trump campaign and Cambridge Analytica, on the other side, the Internet Research Agency. All of their data and public-facing communications feeding through, then, in the U.S. side, Brad Parscale, who worked closely, of course, with campaign chair Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort working closely at the same time with Konstantin Kilimnik, who was the coordinator and running the data product from out of the Internet Research Agency. And then, of course, the last level here, Guccifer 2.0 from the Russian side, and Aaron Nevins on the American side. I don't know how much that means to all of you, but at least it tells you who are the players we're talking about in this piece. And Mark begins. In November, the special counsel's office filed court documents stating that Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort had breached his plea arrangement with that office. In connection with that filing, both the government and Manafort's attorneys have filed a series of documents. In the process, a number of items have come to light, including that Manafort's attorneys don't know how to use redaction. What's also emerged is that Manafort's actions in support of the Trump campaign included traveling to Europe meeting with Russian operative Konstantin Kilimnik and providing him with internal polling data from the Trump campaign. The Russians clearly placed a high value on this information, or Manafort would not have offered it to them. It seems very likely that Russia used information collected by the digital operations team at the Trump campaign to feed and refine its models for social media operations, data that could easily include stolen information used by Cambridge Analytica. Most recently, the special counsel's office produced a response running to over 180 pages. Unfortunately, for those wanting a peek, Mueller's team does know how to use the redacted feature, and the resulting pages look a lot like this, and there's an inclusion here that basically shows next to nothing. All we get to read out of the entire paragraph is, Manafort was then asked what? After a lunch break, Manafort... That's it. That's the entirety of the clip. So much of the document is redacted that it sometimes feels as if the few words left visible are only there for the amusement of the attorneys marking up the document, an intentional tease for the would-be reader. But amidst all these black bars and many, many pages that simply bear the word redacted, there's one section that suggests, not for the first time, that the flow of information between the Trump campaign and Russia's Internet Research Agency wasn't simply a matter of Manafort dropping off some data in Madrid, or even the occasional meeting in Trump Tower. It suggests that the Trump campaign's digital operations and Russia's efforts on behalf of the Republican candidate were combined in a closely integrated operation. The section in question appears on page 18 of the court document, and it's linked herein, and it is redacted, and it reads, it's paragraph 45 here, someone, redacted, told the government that he was primarily responsible for drafting the blank. Blank based his blank, is like Match Game 76 here, blank based his blank on directions given to him by Manafort, and then sent the drafts to Manafort for his review. For example, Manafort instructed blank, blankety blank blank blank. Manafort also received input from blank. For instance, on February 19th, 2018, Manafort sent blank comments that Manafort received from blank. Similarly, on March 9th, Manafort included blank notes on draft 4 of the survey. Several of the questions in the blank, and that's where we are. This is the section from government's contention that Manafort breached his agreement. The opening of this suggests that it might pin Manafort as the author of the Republican platform plank on Ukraine. That's still possible. There are also dates in this section that point to something happening after the election, happening, in fact, in early 2018. Manafort had already been indicted in the fall of 2017, and the purpose of the government's document was to show instances in which Manafort lied to prosecutors. So, the two dates in 2018 seem to be instances in which Manafort passed along false information. But underlying those lies is the information that Manafort told the government that he was primarily responsible for drafting something. And at the bottom of the section, there's a clue about what that something might be. Because one of the things Manafort provided was someone's notes on a draft of a survey. Immediately following this, the next sentence indicates several of the questions in the, survey. Manafort was responsible for something. That something was described as a survey, and it included questions. It's not much, but it's enough to suggest that Manafort might not have been simply passing along polling data requested by the Russians. He may have been bringing back questions from the Russians to run through the digital operations assembled between the campaign's digital operations under Brad Parscale and the data crunching engines of Cambridge Analytica, created by Steve Bannon and Republican mega donors Robert and Rebecca Mercer. Even if the heavily redacted section is a red herring, it's just one of several items showing that Russia's Internet Research Agency and Trump's digital operations weren't ships that passed in the night. They were massive psychological warfare engines that got together in the dark and aimed directly at the American public. Trump's digital coordinator, Brad Parscale, who is the chair now of Trump's 2020 campaign, bragged about the effectiveness of Cambridge Analytica and its psychographic targeting. For the Trump campaign, being able to run its data through Cambridge's engine allowed it to aim media buys and email campaigns directly at the voters most likely to flip in the regions most likely to prove vital. And Pascal had more than just Cambridge's big data tools at hand. Republican strategist Aaron Nevins, now we get to figure out who he is, working with Russian hackers, going by the handle Guccifer 2.0, not Aaron, but the hackers going by that handle, identified Democratic get-out-the-vote campaign plans in documents stolen from the DNC by Russian hackers. Nevins made this information available to both Russia and Republican campaigns in the United States, improving the effectiveness of their outreach, particularly when it came to suppressing Democratic votes, which was a major focus for both Trump and Russia. It's clear that the Russians used this information in their vote suppression campaign, using the placement of ads and even boots-on-the-ground protests staged by Cosmo turf organizations. Cosmo, get it? Astro turf organizations in areas where they could lower support for Hillary Clinton. At the same time, they were able to place both pro-Trump information and information designed to inflame fears over immigration and racial issues in regions that were potential sources of votes for Trump. Their program was three-pronged: suppress votes among the Democratic base, drive up anger and fear among Trump's base, and target marginal votes, often by showing them racially tinged, let's say, imagery and statements created by one of their false organizations. The Russian operations did things that were clearly illegal, or at least out of bounds of normal political campaigning, creating thousands of false social media accounts and tens of thousands of bot-driven accounts, creating hundreds of false organizations that pretended to be everyone from Black Lives Matter to injured veterans, creating pop-up news sites that mimicked real sites like NBC or ABC but slipped in stories that heightened fears about Hillary Clinton or presented false endorsements for Trump. They did the dirty work of the Trump campaign, allowing Pascal and Trump to run their website, make their ad buys, and claim that their effectiveness was all in the genius of their modeling. More than a year ago, Vanity Fair noted the uncanny level of targeting from Russian operations that should have been data poor when it comes to the kind of information that parties and campaigns spend years collecting, noting that analysts scoff at the notion that Russians figured out how to target African Americans and women in decisive precincts in Wisconsin and Michigan all by themselves. Manafort was providing data to the Russians, and there's no doubt that the reason they wanted that data was exactly for the reasons that many speculated about in 2017. Trump campaign data, complete not just with internal polls, but with the numbers crunching of Cambridge Analytica and the stolen data pointed out by Aaron Nevins, fueled the Russian targeting effort, giving their outreach added heft and effectiveness. And of course, the Russians had all the data collected by the Republican Party, which was available to Trump once he became the nominee. In essence, the Russians were able to identify their targets based on information from both parties, plus anything else they or the Trump campaign picked up or stole along the way. Then, on top of it all, they had the engine created by Cambridge Analytica for the express purpose of election inoculation. The document excerpt suggesting that Manafort was also involved in crafting polling questions could be a red herring. In fact, based on its connection to questions about Manafort's work after the campaign, it very likely is unrelated. But that doesn't change the relationship. The Trump campaign provided the data and the analysis. The Russians provided their expertise in disinformation and deception, and both of them celebrated the victory over America. So, there you have it. I just wanted to get Mark's interpretation of things on the record for you. And let's see, 10:21, eh? That gives us some time, I suppose, to turn to, in one of two or three other directions. Do I really want to send this way, or shall we go in this direction? How about we go over to here? More Trump-Russia issues. This one from Business Insider, I thought, reiterated a number of the same themes. Maria Snegovia from the Institute for the Study of War, which I don't know anything about, but published in Business Insider, along the same lines. Reflexive control, it's called. Putin's hybrid warfare in Ukraine is straight out of the Soviet playbook. A theme that's been recurring in all this, but this focused on Ukraine instead. Russia, it says, has been using an advanced form of hybrid warfare in Ukraine since early 2014 that relies heavily on an element of information warfare that the Russians call reflexive control. Might as well learn the term here if it's real. Reflexive control causes a stronger adversary voluntarily to choose the actions most advantageous to Russian objectives by shaping the adversary's perceptions of the situation decisively. I guess we'll make a sports metaphor here and call it the influence block. Ever hear of the use of the influence block in football? Sometimes blocking people in the very direction that they might ordinarily, if they had a wider view of the play, want to go, makes them believe, if I'm being blocked in this direction, I must want to get in that direction. He's trying to take me away from the direction I should be going, and then I will, use all my all my powers to defeat this block, which miraculously the blocker eventually allows you to do, and you rush past him thinking you're breaking up the play, but you've in fact taken yourself out of the play by heading in the direction that he was blocking you away from, thinking you were going to make the play, but instead the play is running right at where you were a minute ago. You get the idea? Basically, a reverse psychology block, essentially. Moscow has used this technique skillfully to persuade the U.S. and its European allies to remain largely passive in the face of Russia's efforts to disrupt and dismantle Ukraine through military and non-military means. The West must become alert to the use of reflexive control techniques and find ways to counter them if it is to succeed in an era of hybrid war. And I guess here I'll just remind everybody that you'll recall the secretly recorded conversation between Paul Manafort and Kevin McCarthy and other Republican leaders from, when was it? Back in June of 2016 or so, in which Kevin McCarthy says that he's pretty sure Trump and Rohrabacher are being paid by Putin, right? And then Ryan swears them all to secrecy. Much of the premise for the horrible things that the Russians were doing was their realization, now that they had been briefed by the Ukrainians, that the Russians were in fact running precisely this sort of operation in Ukraine, and for whatever reason, they either refuse to acknowledge or cannot see that the same thing is happening in the United States. But to the extent that they do see it, they should remain quiet about it because reasons. No one says what the reasons are, but the reasons probably are, don't worry about it, it won't hurt us. Yes, they're disrupting America's elections, but they're doing it for us. So let's be quiet about it. All right, where do we leave off? Reflexive control, and the Kremlin's information warfare generally, is not the result of any theoretical innovation. All of the underlying concepts and most of the techniques were developed by the Soviet Union decades ago. Russian strategic theory today remains relatively unimaginative and highly dependent on the body of Soviet work with which Russia's leaders are familiar. Russian information operations in Ukraine do not herald a new era of theoretical or doctrinal advances, although they aim in part to create precisely this impression. Russia's information warfare is thus a significant challenge to the West, but not a particularly novel or insuperable one. It relies above all on Russia's ability to take advantage of pre-existing dispositions among its enemies to choose its preferred courses of action. The primary objectives of the reflexive control techniques Moscow has employed in the Ukraine situation has been to persuade the West to do something its leaders mostly wanted to do in the first place, namely, remain on the sidelines as Russia dismantled Ukraine. These techniques would not have succeeded in the face of Western leaders determined to stop Russian aggression and punish or reverse Russian violations of international law. The key elements of Russia's reflexive control techniques in Ukraine have been denial and deception operations to conceal or obfuscate the presence of Russian forces in Ukraine, including sending in little green men in uniforms without insignias. Okay, that helps explain what that was. That came up just the other day, right? Concealing Moscow's goals and objectives in the conflict, which sows fear in some and allows others to persuade themselves that the Kremlin's aims are limited and ultimately acceptable. Retaining superficially plausible legality for Russia's actions by denying Moscow's involvement in the conflict, requiring the international community to recognize Russia as an interested power rather than a party to the conflict, and pointing to supposedly equivalent Western actions, such as the unilateral declaration of independence by Kosovo in the 90s. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air, and now that's down to about 1 in 15, but we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7, for which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against that. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now that's not all on you, but remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com, is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X, or David Waldman, or Kagro in the Morning, or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. And now here we are. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. And, here we go. Finally, we are back. It looks like, for whatever reason, my music faded out on me, and I think, so I can't figure out now whether we came back late or we're coming back just right on time here. Well, things are weird when you get up and you leave the keyboard. At any rate, back with you now and reading through the list from Business Insider of the various elements of Russia's so-called reflexive control techniques that they have been employing in Ukraine. Once again, just to recap, right off the bat, the first of the elements, denial and deception operations to conceal the fact that they're even in Ukraine, concealing Moscow's goals and objectives in the conflict, which, as they say here, sows fear in some and allows others to persuade themselves that the Kremlin's aims are limited and ultimately acceptable. Third, retaining superficially plausible legality for Russia's actions, right? And also pointing to supposedly equivalent Western actions, such as the unilateral declaration of independence by Kosovo in the 90s and the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Did you know they viewed it that way? Simultaneously, threatening the West with military power in the form of overflights of NATO and non-NATO countries' airspace, threats of using Russia's nuclear weapons, and exaggerated claims of Russia's military prowess and success. Lastly, the development of a vast and complex global effort to shape the narrative about the Ukraine conflict through formal and social media. The results of these efforts have been mixed. Russia has kept the West from intervening materially in Ukraine, allowing itself the time to build and expand its own military involvement in the conflict. It has sowed discord within the NATO alliance and created tensions between potential adversaries about how to respond. It has not, however, fundamentally changed the popular or elite attitudes about Russia's actions in Ukraine, nor has it created an information environment favorable to Moscow. Above all, Russia has been unable so far to translate the strategic and grand strategic advantages of its hybrid warfare strategy into major and sustainable successes on the ground in Ukraine. It appears, moreover, that Moscow may be reaching a point of diminishing returns in continuing a strategy that relies in part on its unexpectedness in Ukraine. Yet the same doctrine of reflexive control has succeeded in surprising the West in Syria. The West must thus awaken itself to its strategy, this strategy, and to adaptations of it. So, I mean, nice admonition, but not much in the way of clues as to how to do that, and no mention of the possibility that it might be happening here. in the United States in slightly modified form where they have no physical presence, or at least we think they don't. Although I'm open to suggestions that they might. Let's see. Another issue on the Trump-Russia front that I thought I would bring up. Let's see if we have some reporting on it at this point. Well, we do, but it's from the Telegraph in the UK, and so therefore firewalled. But let's see if there's any more here from Natasha Bertrand, who tweeted yesterday this Telegraph article, and we'll see whether maybe she followed up with something else that we can read. Big, she says, a fake LinkedIn profile linking poisoned double agent Sergei Skripal to Christopher Steele, which prompted conspiracy theories about MI6's role in the Novichok attack, was allegedly created by the GRU more than a year before Skripal was poisoned. How do you like that? Best thing we can get, or the most we can squeeze out of the Telegraph article here, is their headline and a few of their lead sentences. Kremlin accused of laying false trail linking Sergei Skripal to ex-MI6 officer behind Trump dossier. That's the headline. Robert Mendick is the reporter on this piece, and we get bits and pieces of three lead paragraphs here. Russian intelligence created a false trail linking the double agent Skripal to former MI6 officer behind the Trump dossier before carrying out the Salisbury nerve agent attack, the Telegraph has been told. Well-placed sources now believe that the plot to kill Skripal may have included a black ops attempt to sow doubt on the veracity of the explosive dossier that claims Donald Trump received Kremlin backing. Now, why would they want to do that? The year before the attempted assassination, a mysterious post on LinkedIn suggested his MI6 handler, who is not being named, worked as a senior analyst at Orbis Business Intelligence, the firm that produced the Trump dossier. And that's not a name we've heard them operating under in the past, though, is it? So that's intriguing in itself, but it's as far as we can trace this line, unless by some chance Natasha Bertrand has followed up with another story on that subject. And then so far, I haven't seen it, but, she's left us quite a trail to have to sift through. I was hoping that would have led to something else, but now I can see where that tweet landed and then no further writing on it. I wonder if we might be able to come up with something in a news search. Just curious to see. Well, that leads back to the Telegraph. Well, here, this is just interesting. I mean, I guess this is what they're talking about here. And we have Business Insider, which we just read an excerpt from March of 2018, under the headline, under the Google search headline anyway, it said Sergei Skripal had links to Russia expert Christopher Steele. But I guess that, as we just found out, has been called into question. Their reporting actually ran under the headline of ex-Kremlin spy who apparently poisoned in Britain has links to the man who wrote the explosive Trump-Russia dossier. Jake Cantor wrote in March of 2018. Only now we find out that was very possibly a GRU black ops operation. There's another entry on of the same nature as the Telegraph piece in investigaterussia.org, but I don't know whose operation that is. Does it say here? Home. Does the home button tell us anything? And Committee to Investigate Russia. It tells us nothing about... there's the advisory board. Can I look at, see who the... Max Boot, James Clapper, Evelyn Farkas, Michael Hayden, Jay Johnson, Michael Morrill, a lot of names that have come up here. Norm Ornstein, Leon Panetta, Rob Reiner, we hear from once in a while, Charles Sykes, and Clint Watts. So all people that we have read as sources, some of whom we like a little better than others, some of whom we have a tradition of distrusting, including Michael Hayden, I guess. Norm Ornstein, more to our liking for the most part. Max Boot, mixed results on Max Boot, but we read them an awful lot. And we've heard the names of Clint Watts and others before, and Michael Morrell, Jay Johnson as well. Leon Panetta, not necessarily one of my favorite Obama administration folks, but not among the worst necessarily, I guess we could say. Let's see. Where else might this lead? Well, okay. They are covering the story that the Telegraph had, so maybe they'll help us at least get some insight into summarizing what they had reported. The Telegraph, they say, is reporting that Russian military intelligence, a year before the attempted murder of Sergei Skripal, planted online evidence of a false connection between the former Russian agent and Christopher Steele. You know who he is. I'll skip that and read you the excerpt from, I think, the Telegraph that they include here. Well-placed sources now believe that the plot to kill Colonel Skripal may have included a black ops attempt to sow doubt on the veracity of the explosive dossier. That part we got to read. The year before the attempted assassination, a mysterious post on LinkedIn suggested his MI6 handler, who was not being named, worked as a senior analyst at Orbis Business Intelligence, the firm that produced the Trump dossier, although we always heard them operating under a different name, right? Orbis was co-founded by Christopher Steele, the former head of MI6's Russia desk who authored the Trump dossier. Mr. Steele's dossier included the central claim that the Kremlin had been, quote, cultivating, supporting, and assisting Trump for at least 5 years, unquote, and the allegation that Russia was in possession of a video showing Mr. Trump engaged in lewd sex acts with prostitutes in Moscow. You all remember that story. It is now suspected that the LinkedIn profile was created by the GRU, the Russian military intelligence unit which tried to kill Skripal with Novichok nerve agent. One reason would be to connect MI6 to Skripal's murder and at the same time flag the possibility that the British Secret Service was behind the Trump dossier. A well-placed source said, by creating this link, they are suggesting that MI6 are involved with the dossier or Skripal or both. It adds to the confusion and acts as a wedge between the White House and Downing Street. It is exactly the kind of operation the Russians would order to sow confusion. The appearance of the false LinkedIn profile more than a year before the attempted murder also raises the prospect that the plot was being planned for some time. An internet hyperlink to the LinkedIn page appeared in an obscure blog posting in January of 2017, more than a year before the Salisbury attack, but the actual LinkedIn page itself has never been visible. At the time the LinkedIn reference was made public, Russia was angrily denying any involvement in the attempted murder of Colonel Skripal. Several sources have now confirmed to the Telegraph that Colonel Skripal's handler never did any work for Orbis. He was known to Mr. Steele from their time together at MI6. Mr. Steele ran MI6's Russia desk, but crucially, neither the handler nor Colonel Skripal himself provided any information or help for the Trump dossier. This is an awful long excerpt from the Telegraph. The investigaterussia.org could be in trouble for this one. Intelligence sources increasingly believe the LinkedIn claim was falsely placed there by Russian intelligence, presumably by the GRU, as part of a black ops campaign of disinformation. The reason is unclear, but could be, according to informed sources, to undermine Mr. Steele's claims in the dossier by suggesting it is an MI6 plot to get Trump, but also to discredit Skripal in the year before his assassination. It's pretty repetitive, actually, as well. I guess if you go long enough, they'll repeat themselves. Sources are adamant that Skripal had no input in the Trump dossier. The subsequent reports, they insist, were based on a LinkedIn post that not only doesn't appear to exist, but was put there by Russian intelligence. This is over and over. Same thing. Okay. Well, then I guess we've got the essence of it, and we can be done with that entry, too. It was intriguing. Sort of undermined the power of the point by repeating itself over and over on that one, but okay. Let's see. Yes. Here's something I need to add to the mix as well, brought to our attention by Linda Chapman, who tweeted this one to us. By the way, if you'd like to follow along on Linda's timeline, Linda C443, just our online goofy names for one another. But Linda Chapman sent me this one, said, here's one more for the file. Then that would be the file of never trust anything that Donald Trump says or writes, and accept no written material from him at face value ever. And in particular, this is my continuing lesson for members of Congress. They should not be routinely accepting written communications or purported written communications from the President of the United States or purported President of the United States. Everything's purported in this, without examining them. And they should be making him come to the Capitol and sign everything in front of them, which of course he could reciprocate and insist that engrossed bills that are being sent to him, things that we want passed and signed, aren't in fact valid, and the Secretary of the Senate and Clerk of the House and Speaker of the House and all need to come and sign engrossed bills in front of him in the White House. But might be an even trade. We'll see. Anyway, this is a note from Drew Hamill, who is Deputy Chief of Staff to Speaker Pelosi, who tweeted yesterday in response to another baiting tweet from Donald Trump. Donald Trump tweeting, when did he do this? Let's trace this all the way back. Yeah, this would be Sunday, I guess, at 8 in the morning. Nancy, because that's how he speaks there. Nancy, I am still thinking about the State of the Union speech. There are so many options, including doing it as per your written offer made during the shutdown. Security is no problem. And my written acceptance. While a contract is a contract, I'll get back to you soon. So trying to troll her into believing, oh my God, this guy understands written contracts better than anybody else in the country. And he's such a businessman and a deal maker, I better listen to him. The implication being, well, you wrote an invitation to me, and that's a binding offer. And I have written my acceptance to you, and that's a binding acceptance, and we have a contract. And, of course, it has no bearing whatsoever on whether or not she decides to make the House chamber available to him for the State of the Union or not. It's not the sort of contract, I don't think, that can be enforced in the courts. But at any rate, it's an interesting way of looking at things. Well, you wrote an invitation to me, and I've written my acceptance, so we have a binding contract. Well, okay. Besides the fact that, no one can probably sue to enforce that contract, Drew Hamill notes, to be clear, the Speaker's office never received any sort of written acceptance from the president. So he's out there insisting that a contract exists based on her written invitation and his written acceptance, except the written acceptance doesn't exist. How strange. Why should anybody take his word for anything? And again, I use this as an opportunity to say, don't believe anything he sends you. He is read. Don't believe you that anything that bears his signature, it actually does bear his signature. I'm sure we already saw someone depart from the White House bragging on the notion that he was able to forge the president's signature and do it better than the president himself. And as disinterested as this president is in process and policy, you better believe he'd be perfectly happy to have somebody do the dirty work of signing things for him, unless, of course, it's something that they're going to do on camera in front of everybody. Okay, let's see. One more thing, I guess by way of illustration of how disinterested and detached from reality the president actually is, I could read some of this trending piece about that. Absolutely out of control. Cliff Sims' book depicts life in Trump's White House. I know nothing about Cliff Sims or his book, but apparently it's the latest hot book out there about this subject. Phil Rucker is reporting this one, and there was a great excerpt from it being circulated yesterday. We'll see if we can make our way through some or all of it before closing things out here for the day. President Trump. This is really good. It's right up at the top. Excellent. So do you think he might be having people just read that for me, sign that for me? I don't want to know. I don't care. It's too long. I can't figure it out. He can figure out just signing things. Here, sign this stack of papers. And that could be happening. But, Trump being Trump, it might also not be happening. I don't know why somebody else would brag about how much they practiced forging his signature, right? President Trump, it says here, watched on television, increasingly angry as House Speaker Paul D. Ryan, remember him, criticized his handling of the deadly white House supremacist rally in Charlottesville. He held the remote control like a pistol and yelled for an assistant to get the Republican leader on the phone. Paul, do you know why Democrats have been kicking your, and I assume they say ass here, but they actually print a dash dash. We can even say ass. Come on. Kicking your ass for decades? Because they know a little word called loyalty. And that's so Trumpian. And they know a little thing called loyalty. It's called management. It's called stamina. It's called. Because they know a little word called loyalty. Trump told Ryan, then a Wisconsin congressman. Thanks for filling us in on that one. Why do you think Nancy, that is Pelosi, has held on this long? Have you seen her? She's a disaster. Every time she opens her mouth, another Republican gets elected. But they stick with her. Why can't you be loyal to your president, Paul? What does that point even mean? It's a little thing. You know why you've been getting your ass kicked for decades? It's a little thing called loyalty. Look at Nancy Pelosi. They're totally loyal to her, and every time she opens her mouth, they lose. So we should do the same thing. What? Fine, whatever. The tormenting continued. Trump recalled Ryan distancing himself from Trump in October of 2016, in the days after the Access Hollywood video, in which he bragged of fondling women, and the time that it first surfaced in the Washington Post. I remember being in Wisconsin, and your own people were booing you, Trump told him, according to former West Wing communications aide Cliff Sims. Oh, really? It's a tell-all book from a Trumpster. You were out there dying like a dog, Paul, like a dog. And what did I do? I saved your ass. Can you believe this guy is unbelievable? Poor dogs, too, by the way, in his world. The browbeating of the top Republican on Capitol Hill was one of the vivid snapshots of life inside the Trump White House, told by one of its original inhabitants, Cliff Sims, in his 384-page tell-all Team of Vipers, which goes on sale next week and was obtained in advance by the Post. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. Sims, who enjoyed uncommon personal access to Trump, recounts expletive-filled scenes of chaos, dysfunction, and duplicity among the president, his family members, and administration officials. Unlike memoirs of other Trump officials, Sims's book is neither a sycophantic portrayal of the president nor a blistering account written to settle scores. Really. The author presents himself as a true believer in Trump and his agenda, and even writes whimsically of the president, but still is critical of him, especially his morality. Sims also finds fault in himself, a rarity in Trump world, writing that at times he was selfish, nakedly ambitious, and a coward. No surprise, but okay. Surprised that he says it. The author reconstructs in comic detail the Trump team's first day at work, when the president sat in the residence raging about news coverage of the relatively small size of his inauguration crowds, and White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer scrambled to address it. Spicer had worked the team into a frenzy, and it fell to Sims to write the script for his first statement to the media. Nervously chewing gum, he's probably swallowing it as well, Spicer dictated a torrent of expletives with a few salient points scattered in between. At one point, Sims's computer crashed and he lost the draft, so it had to be rewritten. And in their rush to satisfy the impatient president, nobody checked the facts. Spicer, he writes, was walking into his own execution. It's impossible to deny how absolutely out of control the White House staff, again, myself included, was at times, Sims writes, for which crime I hope one day we are able to execute all of them. But okay, I'm moving on. The book's scenes are consistent with news reporting at the time from inside the White House, so you knew what was going on and you were right at the time. Sims depicts Trump as deeply suspicious of his own staff. He recalls a private huddle in which he and Keith Schiller, the president's longtime bodyguard and confidant, helped Trump draw up an enemies list with a Sharpie, of course, on White House stationery. We're going to get rid of all the snakes, even the bottom feeders, Trump told them. Snakes, of course, not really known as aquatic bottom feeders, but okay. White House Chief of Staff John F. Kelly told the staff that he viewed his job as serving the country first, POTUS second, which Sims interpreted as potentially hostile to Trump's agenda. Sims recounts that Kelly once confided to him in a moment of exasperation, "This is the worst expletive job I've ever had. People apparently think that I care when they write that I might be fired. If that ever happened, it would be the best day I've had since I've walked into this place." Of course, and he went out a coward as well. A conservative media figure in Alabama, Sims came to work on Trump's 2016 campaign and cultivated a personal relationship with the candidate turned president. What a dumb term that is. But okay. Sims writes rich extended dialogue from his conversations with Trump and others in the administration. I'm sure they are working on denying it all right now. As White House Director of Message Strategy, Sims regularly met Trump at the private elevator of the residence and accompanied him to videotapings, carrying a can of Tresemme Tray 2 hairspray extra hold for the boss. At one such taping, now we know what brand he prefers, and it's a supermarket brand, no surprise there. At one such taping, about an hour after Trump had tweeted that he saw MSNBC host Mika Brzezinski, quote, bleeding badly from a facelift, the president sought feedback from Sims and Spicer. They're going to say it's not presidential, Trump said. Oh, I should have said it in his voice, referring to the media. But you know what? It's modern day presidential. What does that mean? Nothing. He just said it. The president then raged about the Morning Joe program on which Brzezinski appears and instructed Spicer, "Don't you dare say I watched that show." We all know. What are you, an idiot? You see you tweeting about it all the time. Sims also recounts a meeting with Attorney General Jeff Sessions, a longtime friend, and former Chief Strategist Stephen Bannon, at which Sessions suggested a polygraph test of national security officials to root out leakers after the Post reported the transcripts of Trump's phone calls with the Mexican president and Australian prime minister. At times, Trump evinced less rage than a lack of interest. Sims recounts one of the times when Ryan was in the Oval Office explaining the ins and outs of the Republican health care bill to the president. This is the snippet I really wanted you to hear, that Daniel Dale was sharing this one. And that's how I became aware of it. But remember, of course, this was the president who campaigned. We're going to give you a beautiful health care. We're going to replace Obamacare, which is such a disaster. I have a beautiful, beautiful plan. It's going to be terrific. It's going to be great, right? Of course, he had no plan. Here comes Tim Ryan, might as well have been, right? Here comes Paul Ryan to bail him out with an actual plan. He wants nothing to do with it. This is where I was saying that this story would back up the disengagement that leads me to believe that he has people signing things for him, right? So, here he is. Ryan is in the Oval Office explaining the ins and outs of the Republican health care bill to the president. As Ryan droned on for 15 minutes, wow, 15 minutes on a whole health care plan, Trump sipped on a glass of Diet Coke, peered out at the Rose Garden, stared aimlessly at the walls, and finally walked out. Ryan kept talking as the president wandered down the hall to his private dining room, where he flicked on his giant flat-screen TV. Apparently, he had had enough of Ryan's talk. It fell to the Vice President Pence to retrieve Trump and convince him to return to the Oval Office so that they could continue their strategy session. Man, Sims reconstructs moments of crisis for West Wing's communications team in a play-by-play detail, including the domestic abuse allegations against former Staff Secretary Rob Porter, who I think did all that forging, right? And the firing of James Comey as FBI director. He paints Spicer, Counselor Kellyanne Conway, and communications advisor Mercedes Schlapp in an especially negative light. Good. Calling Conway the American sniper of West Wing marksmen, and describing her agenda as survival over all others, including the president. Sims writes that former aide Omarosa Manigault cursed members of the Congressional Black Caucus when they asked for a moment of privacy in the West Wing after meeting with Trump and before addressing the media. Privacy, Manigault said. You think you can come up in our house and demand privacy? Hell no, you must be out of your mind. That's pretty interesting. And there's more, of course, and a little bit more. We probably could even fit it in here, but there's a little bit extra on Reince Priebus, on Scaramucci, but you get the idea. And chiefly, I wanted you to listen in and reiterate or get the chance for us to reiterate how disengaged Trump can be and how ridiculous it is to believe that the things he's sending you that he says he's signed, he either understands or has even actually signed himself. You never know. Anyway, time to hand the microphones over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and he's got on tap for you any number of interesting stories, including a former federal prosecutor worrying that Jim Dandelion Jordan will turn the Cohen House oversight hearing into a circus to protect Trump. A Nigerian politician banned from the U.S. for corruption spent last Thursday night at Trump's D.C. hotel.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Yes, and in case you were wondering, how did he get unbanned and end up at the Trump hotel? Well, it's after paying $1 million to a GOP White House lobbying firm. The Russian pop star at the heart of the Trump Moscow Tower scandal canceled his U.S. tour for fear he'll be detained in the Russia probe, and the U.S. seeks to formally extradite Huai from Canada.